Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us for the CWA Cafe. We're going to give it a minute while everyone gets started. Some people are still joining us. My name is Laura Riley. I'm the Managing Director of Chicago Wilderness Alliance. I'm going to ask that everyone keep themselves on mute for the presentation portion of the cafe. And please place any of your questions into the chat. We'll do our best to answer those as we have our Q&A section, and there'll be an opportunity to probably unmute yourself and ask some questions at the end. I want to let you know that this cafe will be recorded, and a PDF of the slides and the recording will be added to our website so that you can review or share these with your colleagues and staff later. I want to give a quick thank you to our sponsors and for the support to bring this cafe to you. Thank you to the U.S. Forest Service and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Urban and Community Forestry Program. Funding supports these workshops so that we can help connect, model, and spotlight programs across the region and bring more trainings to the region and help improve urban tree canopy, tree forests, and participation in Tree City. Learn more at the link that I dropped into the chat. All right, so we're here for the CWA Cafe, Funding Opportunities for Habitat Creation. I want to thank our presenters, Dana Burks from NIPSCO, a NiSource company. She's the Public Affairs and Economic Development Coordinator. Lindy Vasek from ComEd, a Senior Environmental Program Manager. Chris Dubois from Open Lands, Conservation Ecologist. Dave Guritz from Kendall County Forest Preserve District. He's the executive advisor there. Jen Foss Lefebvre, she's Grosse Pointe Neighbors Foundation, and she's a copywriter. And Caroline Hernandez, the Assistant Director of Sustainability and Landscapes team from the University of Illinois at Chicago. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana, and we can advance to the next slide and get this started.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't see the slides moving. There we go. So thank you very much for the warm welcome. I'm Dana Burkus, Public Affairs and Economic Development for NIPSCO. I sit in Fort Wayne, which is Northeast Indiana, and I serve 11 counties in Northeast Indiana for Public Affairs and Economic Development. But I am the tree hugger in our Public Affairs and Economic Development group. So I was nominated when I started 10 years ago to really wrap my arms around the environmental stewardship pillar that is supported through our funding mechanisms, which include the NiSource Charitable Foundation. So the environmental stewardship efforts have really been my baby, and so I'm excited to share all of the things that we do to support that pillar in northern Indiana. NiSource Charitable Foundation supports 4 pillars: basic needs and safety, DEI, STEM education and economic development, and environmental stewardship, which again is my favorite pillar. We do a number of different kind of strategic initiatives across the giving, which is totaled $2.4 million a year. We do impact partnerships, so it's $25,000 a year over 2 years for $50K total, and that's per territory. There are 4 of me across northern Indiana. We have Catalyst grants that are $50,000 per territory annually, and the funnel for supporting those grants is the NIPSCO Environmental Action Grant. So you can switch to the next slide. This is really the way that we get to know new and strategic partnerships within the environmental action pillar. This grant program was created 10 years ago. We did an analysis of our giving and found that while environmental stewardship was a pillar, we weren't giving enough dollars or a strategic amount of dollars to those organizations. And so we sat down and said, well, if they're not asking, we better figure out how to tell them to ask. And so we created this grant. It opens in February. It closes the first week of April. Recipients are announced the week of Earth Day strategically. It's $500 to $5,000 for environmental restoration and education projects and programs. We have a $60,000 annual budget, but typically we expand it because there are just a lot of good projects, and we figure out how to kind of pull dollars from some other territory budgets, or just say, hey, look, this one really has to get funded because it's strategic and important. Geographic diversity is a big piece of what we look at when we support organizations. We serve northern 30 counties in Indiana, and so we want to make sure that we are spreading those projects and programs all across northern Indiana into all the communities that we serve. This grant supports, certainly through the foundation, 501c3 organizations, but there are a lot of great organizations, regional water districts, lake associations that are doing really great projects and programs, and they're educating in great ways. And so we have the majority of the budget hopefully will go to 501c3 organizations. We certainly encourage folks to apply through the community foundations or 501c3s they have access to, but there is additional dollars that we can pull from to be able to support those nonprofits that just don't have a 501c3. And we get some pretty cool projects from opening that up a little bit. Environmental Action Grant acts as really the funding funnel for us to identify organizations that then we grow our partnerships to. So it's really the entry point for a relationship. So switch slides. So in 2024, we had $78,700 supporting 21 projects. A couple of highlights: Indiana Dunes Environmental Learning Center. When you have a national park in your state, you want to make sure you're supporting it. And we have supported the Indiana Dunes Environmental Learning Center for a number of years. But this year, Nats Nature Club was a recipient of Environmental Action Grant. We also support that organization through strategic leadership board service. So the foundation has a leadership board service program. If you have a NIPSCO or a NiSource employee on your board, it's a $2,500 grant direct from the foundation. And if an organization or if an employee is serving as chair, it's $5,000. So dollars follow our employees, and it really supports their efforts in the community to engage with organizations doing great work. For grant applications for the Environmental Action Grant, we have a global software program that is the application. And so we always put on all external information that we really want to see: project description, goals, budget, target audience, timeline, and evaluation method. Our review team is an internal team, but we pull from public affairs, forestry, environmental inspection, and natural resources permitting teams. It's a great knowledge base, and as they read the projects and programs, they're great at pointing out, this is a viable project. We have to support this, figure out how to make this work. And they also are passionate and knowledgeable about the work and the communities that we serve. So that team is responsible for scoring and reviewing the applications, and ultimately we get about 15 to 16 that just are the stars, and we can fund them annually. Community gardens, we don't tend to look at that as environmental stewardship. It's more community development, basic needs, and so not typically funded through Environmental Action Grant. If it's native plants and it's a community garden that just has a larger purpose, then we'll consider it. But we get a lot of them, and they tend to not funnel to the top. One more point on this slide. Again, Environmental Action Grant is really the funnel that we start the relationship with organizations. So Monarch Joint Venture, they had applied for funding to support some habitat restoration in a LaGrange County, Indiana DNR property. We did a site visit, started the conversation with that organization, and we are doing a monarch tagging event in another property in Syracuse, Indiana, which is Kosciuszko County. as part of our Charity of Choice volunteerism program during the month of September. So again, this is really an opportunity. Once funding is identified, or once we have that knowledge of the organization, we start to grow those opportunities to engage with volunteerism, and then also larger funding opportunities. So next slide. Which means I get to talk a little bit about the NiSource Environmental Action Team. Most corporations have ERGs, employee resource groups. We, as utilities, typically do have very large environmental and forestry groups that are passionate and knowledgeable and engaged in external organizations that are doing all kinds of things with the environment. Recreation and education. And again, they're passionate and they all have mud boots in the back of their cars. So they do a ton of volunteerism. And so as we start to build partnerships and relationships with organizations, we also see NEAT come along and either recommend organizations or participate with volunteer activities. And then again, like most corporations, we have a program called Dollars for Doers. So as our employees are out passionately volunteering, they're also earning the organization's $20 an hour for their effort. So we look at it as a win-win-win. Next slide. This is a highlight partnership that it's fun to talk about. So the Wetlands Initiative, probably all familiar with the Chicago Land Organization. They are working to on a project in Gary, Indiana. We have right-of-way that goes through the property, and they are looking at an urban remeandering of streams and urban wetlands restoration. And it's a significant collaboration with a number of Lake County partners, which is a big strategic service area for us. And so when the relationship started with a small grant through Environmental Action Grant in 2021, they followed up and we continued discussing and followed that up with a $50,000 grant from the foundation, which was leveraged for a National Shoreline Resilience funding for $269,000. So we look at it as really the start of a long-term partnership. And this is a photo of our volunteers out there doing I think it was a native planting or a plug planting or maybe last spring at one of their properties. Next slide. So the next 4 slides are really just examples of partnerships that we have across each of the 4 public affairs territories. This one was in my area. Big Brothers Big Sisters came to us and said, look, we've got a big team or a big couple that are really passionate about conservation. They want to do some match activities with kids and we don't have the funding for it. And so we said, well, sure, Environmental Action Grant is a great opportunity. They were awarded the dollars, did it for a year, had some great results. And so we came back and said, look, like this is a really cool initiative. Can we do a 2-year partnership to help you establish the curriculum and really grow those match activities? But maybe add some environmental stewardship partners. We have lots of contacts because we engage with a lot of those organizations, and so they put together over 2 years a really robust match activity partnership. And when we met with them at the end of that 2 years, they said their big numbers had grown significantly because they had a lot of opportunity with bigs who really just wanted to share their passion for environmental stewardship and outdoors and recreation. And so we looked at that as a win-win for outcomes in that area. Next slide. Dunes Learning Center, again, Nats Nature Club, but we also have significant partnerships with Leadership Board Service, and they're a long-term education partner for us. Next slide. East Chicago Monarch Fest. East Chicago is a strategic community for us. The Nature Conservancy does a Festival de la Monarca during September, which is also Hispanic Heritage Month, which checks another box for us in our ERG landscape. We have done volunteerism, supported this event, attended in numbers, and supported through an Environmental Action Grant. Certainly, the monarch migration and the monarch habitat is an important piece of what we do in the environmental arena, and so this was a great opportunity for us to support. Next. Last but not least, if you love buffalo, you can go to Kankakee Sands sooner than later and use the new viewing platform. Nature Conservancy, again, was the recipient of this funding amount, but 23 bison were introduced in 2016. If you give them an area to support, they will procreate. So now there are 90 plus bison roaming the prairie in that area. And this was a great strategic opportunity for us to support that property and then also to allow community to see the bison and engage. So those are my slides.
Thank you. Up next, we have Lindsay Vasek, Chris Bois, Dave Goritz, and Jem Voss-Lafave.
Hi, thanks so much, Laura. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm Lindsay Vasek. I am a Senior Environmental Program Manager at ComEd. I manage our Stewardship and Biodiversity Program, and here to talk to you a little bit today about our Green Regions Grants Program. Go to the next slide, please. So this program was created in 2013 and is funded by ComEd, but it is administered by Open Lands. And you'll hear a little bit from Chris Bois in a few minutes about the process that Open Lands goes through to review projects and select them for funding. Awards are up to $10,000, and we fund about 20 to 30 projects per year. That just depends on if the most competitive applications are requiring the maximum amount, which is $10,000. And just to mention that there is a centralized portal where the application documents, anything that grantees need during the management process, as well as the final report submissions are all there in one place to make it easy. And I won't read these stats, but just to say we've awarded more than $2 million in projects to over 280 projects, and that benefited more than 1.6 million people in our service territory in Northern Illinois. For the next slide, please. Eligible applicants include nonprofits, school districts, and municipalities in our service territory. It is actually new to the program that nonprofits and schools are eligible to apply, and many of our applicants from the last 3 years actually come from those entities, which is great. It's an 18-month project period, and we ask applicants to submit in the spring, and then we announce awards in late summer. There is a requirement to submit a final report to Open Lands and ComEd by 2 months after the final expenditure of grant funds. And I mentioned that awards are announced in late summer. Our awards this year were just announced for the 12th annual cycle. There is a special focus this year on creating nature-based solutions to climate change. The two focuses, are pollinator conservation and climate resiliency. And $200,000 is going to go to 23 communities across our service territory. So with that, we're going to hear a little bit from Chris and then from 2 of our grantees that have received these awards and what they were able to do with this funding. Over to you, Chris.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Bois, conservation ecologist from Open Lands. I'm here just to talk a little bit about what makes a competitive grant proposal as someone who helps administer the grant along with a couple of colleagues, and also as someone who has to, apply for grants themselves as part of a team on Open Lands, as getting funding for our restoration projects. And just to start, I think one of the big keys for me is that you really want to be developing your projects and your priorities as an organization, independent of the funding. I think it's best to, do that, determine your priorities, get some projects that you want to get on the ground, and then find funding that fits that rather than the other way around, trying to reverse engineer a project based on, a particular source of funding. In my experience, just does not work as well. Another tip I have, is that aesthetics can really matter. Making sure you present your plans in an attractive way can definitely make your project more appealing. That means, putting together maybe some nice maps for what you're planning to do. I think that also helps in that it often shows that you're getting other people in your organization involved, your mapping person, your GIS person, stuff like that. And even if you don't have those types of roles in your organization, we've gotten plenty of applications to Green Region that are for, community gardens, school gardens, stuff like that, smaller areas where they provide hand-drawn maps. It just helps show that you've thought about this, that you've sort of planned everything out before you've even submitted the application. I think it looks good. And building off of that, projects should be a team effort. Project that really is spearheaded just by one person can be very hard to finish or complete adequately if that person moves on. Speaking as someone who has to, review final grant reports as they come in, that's sometimes a problem. Obviously if someone is good about kind of involving other people, leaving behind enough notes, stuff like that, you can make it work. But I think it's good to have it, be on multiple people, to have sort of some fail safes. Even if someone's just out on vacation, having people who can keep moving that project along is very good. And again, that just goes to show that, if you have multiple people working on something, it's probably more of an organizational priority. It's something that you're going to be wanting to do, even if you don't get the funding, even if, complications arise. And another, point, partners are very obviously important on these projects. A lot of grants, require or at least want to see partners involved in your projects. And I agree that that's very important, but that work is pretty much always going to be done before the application process. Trying to get some people that you don't have good relationships with, that you don't have working relationships with, involved in your project within the 2 months, an application might be open, is just very hard. And, speaking as someone who's applied for grants, there have been many cases where we're working with community partners and, we try and get a project together in time and it just doesn't work out. And then we try again next year, and doing that kind of trial and error process really helps build up that trust and that working relationship. It makes the partners a lot more willing to help. It makes things a lot more effective. It takes time is what I'm trying to say, really. And that you can't just get it all done, within the 2 months you have to complete your application. And again, this one's sort of related to the aesthetics idea. Making your application easy to read is often very helpful. Use all the provided templates, that might be available for certain grants. Those templates often, can give you a hint as to what the funders are really looking for, what their priorities are and what they want to see. Same thing if you have to provide match or something like that, just make it as clear as possible, where that match is coming from, maybe what line in your budget is, highlight that line. You really just want to make it as smooth of a process as possible for whoever's evaluating your grant, to make sure that they can very quickly and easily see that, you're eligible, that you have everything ready, that everything looks good. I think all that is very helpful. And then, this next one gets back to that first point, which is the project should really feel ready to go. You should have maybe some quotes for what you're trying to do. If you're doing some seeding or planting, you should have those lists prepared. You should probably have already looked at nurseries, seen kind of what the general prices are going to be. You should have your maps made prior to the application, really, even. And, that helps in terms of just level setting your budget, making sure that you can get, what you're saying you're going to get done with the money you will get. I think that's, something that really helps, especially if you don't have the staff time or the expertise to do this sort of stuff yourself. Contracting it out can get really expensive really quick. So just having sort of these ideas of what you're going to spend because you've already reached out, you've already proactively kind of, gotten some baseline numbers for the stuff really will help. It also makes your project just feel more complete and more ready to go for people who are funding it. And then another thing, I think very important is making sure that your goals and methods are clear and measurable. It should be really easy for the funders to understand what you're trying to achieve and exactly how. You can use, I don't mean to say that you shouldn't, include things like you want to build supports, you want to engage the community, stuff like that. That stuff is perfectly fine, but you also want to make sure you're being a little more concrete, saying maybe we'll have a certain number of volunteer events, we'll table at an event, we'll, stuff like that, that you can really just come to the end of your project and say, we did do this, we check it off the list, that you did do these things. And they're a part of building that support, engaging the community and stuff like that. But just the more concrete and clear you can be, I think the easier it is, and the easier it is for the funders to understand what you're trying to do. And then finally, the one thing I would also say is really just to keep your heads up. As someone who has to kind of help make the final decision about what to fund, every year, we have to turn down good projects. And then being on the other side of things, I feel like every year I, help turn in what I think are good projects that don't get funded. You're never going to, get every grant you apply for. It's always tough. We're all applying for the same pots and pools of money. And every time, you don't get one, it's a chance to reach out, get some feedback, improve your process, improve your application, improve your project. Yeah, so basically just don't get discouraged, because it's hard and you're never going to get everyone you try for. And then I think we're passing it off now to Dave Buritz.
Thanks, Chris. Well, you said it all. I'm done. We were asked to provide some oversight and of 3 projects that were funded by the ComEd Green Region program. I've got 5 minutes to do that, and they were big projects. So I'm just going to dive into that. Next slide. Our first project, like Chris, is French. Project Merrimack. Merrimack is a French word meaning freshwater fish. It was this area first described by early French explorers here along the Fox River. It's a beautiful site. It's a rare flatwoods habitat. And that map that you're seeing on the right is basically the oak ecosystem corridor for Kendall County. It lies off of the Fox River and the larger tributaries. And so a lot of our work here in Kendall is focused on conserving that particular ecosystem. In fact, all 3 projects that I'll be describing helped to enhance the oak ecosystem habitats within 4 different preserves. So Project Merrimack was about kickstarting some latent efforts in Kendall County with managing our Illinois nature preserve sites. We have 2 of those dedicated nature preserve areas. Merrimack is one of our highest quality natural areas remaining in the county. The ComEd grant, next slide, helped to support restoration clearing along a bluff line leading down into the flatwoods. We had a significant amount of volunteer support, including high school, if you go to the next slide, that actually participated in supporting restoration clearing and burning. Yes, we'll let our high school kids come onto our property and actually assist us with prescribed fire activities, and it was great. The kids loved it. Obviously, it was a cold day, so the fire kept them warm. And so when Chris talks about community partners, in addition to the Nature Preserves Commission, we also partnered with School District 308, and their students actually came out and helped us with locating and measuring some of our larger oaks within this forest preserve and assisting with that restoration clearing activity. We saved money by having our contractors, which ComEd helped to pay for, just handle the cutting and leaving of material. The kids then came out, and our other volunteers came out on different work days to actually pick the material up and burn it for clearing. And next slide kind of gives you the after of that effort with some of the return of the skunk cabbage and marsh marigold and blue flag iris and some of the other keystone species found in this area. Next slide. Second project was in 2017. Sorry, that first project was 2015. 2 years later, we were back asking for a little bit more help with a 45-acre restoration at Henneberry Forest Preserve. In the slide, that's the little yellow circle on that. Henneberry Forest Preserve is about 250 acres. It's our best grassland / shrubland here in the county. It's got a lot of conservative bird species, and it's also located along what's called the Oswego Channel. This was a torrent event that formed that channel at the end of the Pleistocene when a ice wall dam broke through. So you see that white space between the gray. That's because a torrent event formed that entire valley in a very short amount of time. Kind of a neat site. So the $10,000 that was received from ComEd for this project actually helped to support what was a highway mitigation project. The Kendall County Highway Department had a El Domain Road project broken down into 2 phases. We received funding from the Highway Department for both phases. So they needed a place to call home for mitigation of trees that were being cut by that highway project. So they were ready to hand us a $70,000 check, which we gladly accepted. We then also received funding from the Conservation Foundation through a collaborative project that was funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, titled the Fox Valley Monarch Corridor project. And so several agencies participated in that. As part of our efforts, we set up, next slide, we set up these corrals that were to house the mitigated trees. And so you can see those green boxes on the right photo oversight of the project. That yellow line, that was the 45-acre footprint. The different shades that you see there were the different soil types. And so in the larger corrals, that's where we placed our trees and our shrubs, and we planted quite a few perennials. Next slide. Gives you an idea of the volume of material that was being put out there, the size of the material that was required for the mitigation project. Next slide. And again, our project partners. So this is Pam Phelps and Scott Johnson. They are the Eco Club coordinators for Oswego and Oswego East High School. Anytime I have a project out here in Kendall County, Scott Johnson's name is usually tagged to that. He's the grandson of Richard Young. And so in Kane County and Kendall County, he's the grandson of, he's Kendall County royalty as far as we're concerned. And he's a very active environmental science teacher, and he is also a past president of our foundation. All of that, which helps when you're looking for a project partner. And of course, this was something that we had to do. This property was acquired with support from Open Space Land Acquisition Development Program of the DNR, which requires us to take lands out of agricultural production and put them back into natural habitat. Next slide. So we got a lot of help to do this. And this next slide kind of shows some of the activities that we completed with our partners. They helped to basically pull rocks from around the site and create these soil erosion control structures to slow down water, because it was a vacant site. We had it planted in soybeans for 3 years before we affected seeding, cover crop, and planting. And so we were trying to basically shore up some of these head cuts in some of the gully formations that were forming within this footprint. The kids helped plant over 1,500 plugs within these corral areas. And next slide kind of gives you an idea what the outcome was after the fact. And this was just year one. If you're out there today, a lot of these species that we planted, they come back within 3, 4, 5 years. You actually start to see them emerging within the landscape. And it was really a successful project, very diverse, and a lot of wildlife using this area that was once a soybean field. And so this again was a second project that was funded by ComEd Green Region. Our third project was the big one. Next slide. And they helped to fund a rusty patch bumblebee habitat recovery project. This was a bigger project for us. We had again acquired a 136-acre Fox River Bluffs Forest Preserve. 99 acres of that was still in cropland at the time of acquisition. There's a forest preserve located along the Fox River, as you can see in that map showing that location. We acquired in 2015 with support from the DNR through, again, an OSLAD Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, and also a $600,000 grant from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, which ComEd might have some familiarity with. And in 2017, 2 years after we acquired, the rusty patch bumblebee was listed. as a federally endangered species, and it was documented at Hoover Forest Preserve, right next door to Fox River Bluffs Forest Preserve. And so this project really sought to convert 100 acres. Go to the next slide. That 100 acres is to the west of this picture. That's Fox River Bluffs. To the east is Hoover Forest Preserve, and the key is showing various natural area management activities that we've implemented over the past several years in order to support recovery of our local rusty patch population. And so at Fox River Bluffs, that included a 99 acre cropland conversion project. At Hoover, it included restoration clearing of our oak ecosystem bluffs and ravines, enhancement of our prairies, which included seeding. And then at Fox River Bluffs, it included the planting of 31,000 trees and shrubs within that cropland conversion footprint, primarily within the timber soils that are located there. So while everybody was sheltered at home during the pandemic, our education, natural resources, and administration staff and volunteers were out at Fox River Bluffs working on that cropland conversion project. It was all done in-house at a cost of about $100,000 all in, plus another $21,000 of staff costs. So to fund that, again, we had mitigation from that El Domain Road project. That was a new bridge crossing at the Fox River. We received $150,000 from the Highway Department to effect that mitigation project. We received funding from ComEd, Green Region. We received a IDNR Habitat grant. And so this is a bigger project effort. And what we try to do, as Chris had mentioned with ComEd, is find good projects that align well with things that we're already doing, things that are already part of our 5-year plan. So in summary, 7 points to share. Identify projects that fit your priority. As Chris said, don't try to retrofit a program. This is a great program for enhancing what you're already doing and engaging your communities. Properly scope your plan for restoration. Don't overpromise. They're going to know because they have experience with these projects. Generate a site plan showing your locations and planned actions. Recruit multiple project partners, opportunities for community involvement. It doesn't have to be about community involvement, but it certainly helps to support and strengthen your proposal if you've identified some key partners. Match the project with funding from multiple sources if you can. Not always. Our first project was just the district and the ComEd support, but after that, we received support from Fish and Wildlife. We received additional support from the Nature Preserves Commission. So it kind of kicked off a project which kind of grew organically from there with multiple partners helping out for a multi-year effort. Generate a plan for press and social media interest and touch points. I think the public is interested in knowing what we're doing, where we're doing it, and how it's going. And then document your impacts, capture moments, and ultimately tell a good story. All of these projects that were accomplished for the Forest Preserve really had quite a big impact locally. We're not a big agency. We're not Will County. We're not DuPage County. We're the other guys. And but it's fun being the other guys, especially if you do something great that nobody expects you to do. So if you take us through the last few slides, you can see some of the efforts that went into Hoover and Fox River Bluffs. This was actually Y115 coming out for a workday, helping us with planting efforts. Next slide shows some of the things that we did with our restoration clearing, support received from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation. That's one of their staffers and families out for the day. We did some wicking of our goldenrod to try to diversify our prairies a little bit. It worked like a charm. Next slide, we did some interpretive sign work where we acknowledged ComEd and our other partners. That included Clean Energy, TransCanada is a big pipeline company, Fish and Wildlife, Pheasants Forever, ComEd, Open Lands, and our own Forest Foundation. So multiple partners coming together to help us achieve what we otherwise could not have accomplished alone. And last slide are just the takeaways that I just read to you. How did I do? 5 minutes? I bet it was 7. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Dave.
Hi,
Great.
Laura.
Hello. And thank you. I think up next is Jen.
Hi, I have the same problem as Dave where I have 5 minutes to talk about something I'm kind of obsessed with. Our project's a little different. We are an urban garden in front of a bunch of people's houses in the center of Chicago in Lakeview. We call it a neighbor nurtured green space because, to be diplomatic, we're not a city park, so we're not really supported by anyone except for ourselves, but we're also really super utilized by everyone. So it's a high traffic park in the middle of the city that neighbors are responsible for taking care of and planning. So next slide shows post-COVID, you can kind of see what was happening here. The playgrounds were shut in Chicago, like everyone was stuck in their houses working and all the kids were stuck home learning. And our park got like overrun with beautiful usage that really made us think about like the potential and what the traffic patterns were and how people can understand where they should go and maybe where plants should go. The pathways were overrun, the grass was dead, the beds had been kind of dug through, and it was really a great learning about the potential of the park and then learning about what people needed from nature in the city. So the next slide, so that was the park overrun. The next slide is kind of a little overview of the scope of what our project applied for the grant with. We wanted to revise the original garden design with a more contemporary focus on sustainable planting. So taking the old traffic patterns, taking the old layout, but revising it with some more modern gardening concepts that were more relevant to the state of the planet right now. We wanted to partner with a master naturalist because none of us knew what we were doing, and we just all had a lot of great ideas. Her knowledge was just, we could not have done it without her. So finding the right partners up front, I feel like made all the difference for our project. We purchased and installed fencing. This kind of told people like, you walk here, the plants go here. So instead of this battle to protect these spaces and these things we were trying to grow, that made the traffic pattern very clear for people and made them feel welcome where they belonged. We installed informational kiosks in which we talk about the efforts and the volunteer opportunities and the native gardens, which the concept was kind of new to some people. And we commissioned a garden key. This was what you saw on the first page. We found it really essential and still keep using it as both a tool for volunteers to know what plants are in the beds, to know how to garden, and then an ambassador tool for people intrigued by the garden to explain that although this looks wild and beautiful and maybe a little more unkempt than a traditional garden, this is an intentional garden that was designed to look the way you're seeing it, and there's real thought behind it and real science. So the next slide shows, there you go. This is kind of my tips. My project's very different in scale. And all of our funding was grassroots funding. So this was just donations from the community to match for the matching portion of the grant. I would think about it when you're applying for a grant, if you're similar to ours in needs, think about what is your hook. Ours, what made it different is ours wasn't only like a native habitat planting, it was an opportunity to make our space an ambassador space because the amount of people that would be interacting with the garden. So we knew that if we could make it look intentional and beautiful, but do this different kind of gardening, it would explain to people that you can do this in a city and it can be beautiful and it can help the planet at the same time. Next slide. Our next tip is build community from day one. Ours was kind of tricky because we kind of had to fundraise against an idea and it was very hard to explain to people. So we started out in the fall when we were thinking of applying for the grant around Giving Tuesday, saying we really wanted to revitalize the park. We wanted to, modernize its functionality and its utility to the planet. And then once we were doing more learning during the winter and applying for the grant and getting the partners and getting the plan together, we had more details to share with the same community that we had built. So then we reached out to say, here's more specifics on what we're going to do. We have an opportunity that your dollars would be matched dollar for dollar. The more you give now, the more we'll be able to accomplish. And so it's a tight timing, between Giving Tuesday and talking about a garden in the winter, but consider starting early, explaining to your community and building your community, and then going back and asking them before you finalize your grant application for more funds. We did get a great result from that. Next slide. This is for amateurs like me. I love native gardening and I'm learning more about it every day. And I've learned so much in the last 3 years, but I would say if you're a school or you're some kind of 501(c)(3) and you want to do this kind of garden, you need more than plants. You need the infrastructure, you need the light. We had to trim our canopy for the plants to be successful. Like, we needed the knowledge to train volunteers, like what the difference between a weed was in spring and a native plant that you wanted to keep and was intentional. So a lot of the things are not just plants that you need to keep plants alive and to make your garden thrive. Next slide. And then one tool that was really useful for us that I wish we had done at the beginning was consider national certification. We now are a certified wildlife habitat from the National Wildlife Federation, a monarch station from Monarch Watch, homegrown national park. We put ourselves on the map. I think these tools both, I'm sure, to open lands when we were applying for the grant and for our own learning, and to potential supporters of the park now and in the future, this helps explain to them, yes, we are a bunch of neighbors, but yes, what we're doing is also grounded in solid science, and there are big ideas behind it, and our project is disciplined by that. So it kind of can give both your application and your project a lot more credibility to whoever your audience is. Next slide. And this, we'll just use the pictures because it was great. So you can just click through these. It's so cool. You should all stop by. So that's it. And those are our national certifications. We use our Green Region grant also to explain to people the kind of thinking that goes behind this intentional space in the middle of the city. I tried for 5 minutes. I did my best.
Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, you can drop them into the chat. Oh, we're going to go to Caroline Hernandez. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I would still say that you can drop your questions in the chat in the meantime, though, especially since we're tight on time and we might not have a chance to get to all of them. So questions and answers from other presenters in the meantime, I think. So hi, my name is Caroline Hernandez. I'm with the University of Illinois, Chicago, and I am the Assistant Director of the Sustainable Landscapes Program. And we host and facilitate the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group and the Pollinate Program, which is a slightly different type of grant or award. So I want to give some background to it before we really get into the program. So next slide, please. So the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, we started hosting this back in 2015. It is a working group that is supports energy companies and transportation agencies in the creation and conservation of habitat on rights of way and working lands that are associated with these lands. And we started off really small in Chicago back in 2015 and have since grown to now representing more than 400 organizations across the United States and Canada, with more than 1,700 individuals that are participating in this group. And we are more than just transportation agencies and energy, although we go from big to small transportation and energy organizations, oil, gas transmission, industry associations, municipalities, anyone that is managing a right-of-way, can be part of this group. We're also represented by nonprofit organizations. So those are the conservation groups and the environmental groups. We've got technical experts that participate in this group through academia and consultants. And then we've got government agencies that are really invested in this group, from the federal level down to the local level, all those municipalities, those cities and counties that are involved. And the next slide, please, shows the different types of activities that participants of the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group do. I think one of our flagship activities that we focus on, or have been focusing on, and are well known for, is our Monarch Conservation Agreement. And this is a national effort to help support monarch butterfly. We're anticipating a listing decision in December. We've got something similar for 11 at-risk and listed bumblebee species. The working group and its participants have created these programs that are shown on this slide. So we've got a pollinator scorecard to track and monitor habitat on rights of way, geospatial habitat database. We host webinars and roundtables, and resources, library. We've got a seed map to support these organizations. We do a number of research projects focusing on solar and remote sensing. And then we've got a growing Chicago habitat initiative, and we've got the ability to expand it to other cities and other areas. But we've essentially taken the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group and made it mini for Chicago, and it's part of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance Goal 3 group. And so we really focus on, supporting the energy and transportation organizations, but also making sure that the neighboring communities are engaged, the forest preserves are engaged, and we can create and conserve that habitat on rights of way. And we've got our website that hosts the news, the resources, and all of these initiatives as well. And I share this because we would not be doing the things that we're doing today without our partners in the working group. And they are really the ones that are doing, the boots on the ground work. They are doing the planting. They are changing their management styles, and they are creating habitat for pollinators on their lands. Next slide, please. So, in recognition of the work that our partners have been doing to create this habitat, we also recognize that a lot of this starts with one person or one small project of putting habitat on the ground, showing people how easy it is, how much of an impact you can have, the pollinators that you are drawing to your habitat. And that can get the ball rolling for habitat initiatives for the rest of the company or the agency. And so the Pollinate program, we were Stantec gifted funding to UIC to create this program, and this funding and this program was trying to be that catalyst that sometimes organizations need to be able to create this habitat. And sometimes some of our partners already have really incredible programs, but they need just a little bit more funding or a little bit more oomph to get one of the another high quality program or plot on their lands, and to make that difference. And so our program is slightly different because we focus on energy and transportation organizations, or organizations that are working with energy and transportation partners on rights of way. And we offer $3,000 to $10,000 awards. We're not really allowed to call them grants just because of contracting and things, so awards through this program. And the organizations, when you are applying for these awards, you need to be involved in one of the programs that I showed in the previous slide through the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group. And the things that we cover in our small awards program are, costs associated with pollinator habitat creation, those native plants, native seeds, materials to create the habitat, to support biodiversity enhancement, project installation, evaluation, even the planning of some of these projects. And so runs the gamut of types of projects that we support, but it is pretty specific to energy and transportation organizations. Go to the next slide. So we have 2 rounds of funding this year, and we had our summer applications. We received 18 applications, and we had to choose 11. So as Chris mentioned, I believe it's really hard to make those decisions. We wanted to make sure that we still had some funding for the fall, though, as well. And so we stopped at 11, but really impressive projects. I actually received some pictures this morning from one of our recipients of some really great habitat that they created and all of the pollinators that they were able to photograph. One of the things that we like to focus on for these projects is that you do have match when you can. It's not a requirement, but it does make your application more robust. And we really like to see these types of projects happening in environmental justice communities. We want to make sure that the positive impacts that you're having are not just on the environment, but that they are on the surrounding communities as well. And we like to see that you are engaging volunteers, community groups, company employees to get that habitat on the ground. And so showing the buy-in from the community, from your employees is really important in these applications. I know I'm really short on time, and so I'm going to close it now, but we've got, you only have about 1 week left to submit your applications for the fall program. We are closing the application portal at the end of the day, September 16th. So hope to see your applications, and please feel free to reach out with any questions or thoughts about your program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and everyone for great presentations today. I'd love to invite everyone to put their questions in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself. I want to remind you that the recording and a PDF of the slides will be shared to everyone who registered today and will be posted on the website. And if you'd like to host a cafe, please contact me. We'd love to get your idea and have an opportunity to share it in a conversation like this. Any questions, anyone? Thank you. Thank you for joining us.